Today we're going to be looking at 10 people who fake their own kidnapping for shocking reasons. Number 1. Robert Brandt. When police respond to a 911 call from a person who saw Robert Brandt tied up in the back of a truck, they expected to find the duct-tape man disheveled and anxious. However, they were surprised by the victim's calm demeanor. During the investigation, Brandt claimed to have been robbed of $16,000 at gunpoint by two men he had been gambling with. The men then kidnapped him and forced him to drive around western New York. After 2 days, the alleged kidnappers tied him up in the back seat of the truck and left him in the car park. Brandt had cooked up a perfect story that seemed believable at first. However, his clean-shaven face gave the officers enough reason to doubt his narrative. Who gets to groom their face when being kidnapped for almost 3 days? 35 minutes into the investigation, Brandt gave in and revealed that he faked his own kidnapping to avoid paying $50,000 to the winner of the Super Bowl bet that he lost. Number 2. Alejandro Mario Cortez. Mario Cortez was illegally residing in the U.S. in Chicago, Illinois. To get a legal visa, he sought help from an accomplice and staged his kidnapping to become eligible for a special visa handed out to crime victims. He planned to apply for the visa based on the police report that he was kidnapped from his home in Chicago and left in St. Paul. To carry out his plan, he traveled to Minnesota, all the way from Illinois, with his co-conspirator and stayed there for several days at a storage facility. Later, he made his accomplice tie his hands and mouth and leave him in St. Paul. There, he was spotted by a snowplow driver. During the investigation, to add credibility to his story, he also claimed to have received threats through messages in the days leading up to the kidnap. Number 3. A boy in France avoided going to the dentist by hiding in a village. On his way to the dentist, this 12-year-old hid in the Saint Gervais village to avoid the dreaded appointment. When found by the police, the boy used his imagination and came up with a creative story of how he escaped after being kidnapped by a muscular European man in his 30s. He added a finer detail to his villain, a vertical scar on his right cheek. He also vividly described the abductor's clothes and car. The police investigated the case for a month before becoming suspicious after checking security footage at Bagnall's. When confronted, the boy confessed to making up the story and doing all this so he didn't have to go to the dentist. Number 4. A Spanish driver spent all his earnings on sex and drugs. A driver in Spain spent his entire earnings at a strip club on prostitutes and drugs. After running out of cash, he sold his motorbike to continue to fund his night out. When his better sense prevailed, he realized that he had blown away all the money that was supposed to go to the company that he drove for. To cover up for the missing funds and his absence at work the next day, he made up a fairy tale of being robbed by a customer who kidnapped and forced him to spend all his earnings at the club, and later locked him in his garage for a few hours. However, police quickly saw through the gaps in the story, and after they confirmed that he drove to his friend's house to sell the motorbike. Workers at the club also confirmed that he willingly paid for the prostitutes and was under no duress. Number 5. Jessica Nordquist. She faked her own kidnapping as she was infatuated with her ex-boyfriend. This vengeful ex's long list of actions to ruin the life of the man who dumped her includes stalking, online harassment, sham kidnapping, faking a pregnancy, and a rape accusation. Nordquist met Mark Weeks while working for a PR firm in East London. Weeks' trouble began after their relationship ended and Nordquist undertook cyberbullying campaign against him. She accused him of rape and faked pregnancy with a fake baby bump. She then went on to fake her kidnapping by a gang of criminals. For this, she sent her colleagues, friends, and Weeks emails which appeared to be from the gang, claiming to have kidnapped and raped her. She even attached naked photos of herself bound and gagged. After being found home alone and unharmed at her home, she was arrested and sentenced to 4 years of imprisonment by abusing and stalking her ex-boyfriend. Number 6. Maria Gonzalez faked her own kidnapping because she was short cash. The 32-year-old woman from California didn't have money to pay 2 truck drivers who worked for her, so she made up a story of being robbed and kidnapped to avoid the payment. For this, she faked a head injury and tied up her hands with a telephone cord and turned up at a random house in the city, pretending to be looking for help. When being examined at the hospital, Gonzalez told the police that 2 men, one of whom was armed with a gun, forced their way into her car when she had stopped for 2 dogs to cross the road. They then bound and gagged her and made her drive before she lost consciousness. She woke up to find $9,000 stolen from her purse and moisture in her underwear, indicating that she may have been sexually assaulted. Her fairy tale soon lost its credibility after she couldn't explain to the police how she managed to untie herself from the back seat of the car. Number 7. Ramon Pettway. Ramon Pettway was absent for 14 days and faked his own kidnapping so that he wouldn't have to face his girlfriend. 36-year-old Ramon Pettway was first spotted by a passerby on MacLeod Street. At first he couldn't recall how he ended up in this condition, but later claimed to have been kidnapped by 2 men. His abductors, covering his eyes, took him to obscure places. They then left him on the street where he was discovered, hogtied and beaten, and with pain in his ribs. Also, the tape roll wasn't cut off and still hanging from his wrists. This gave the police enough reason to doubt Pettway's story. He later confessed to lying. He took all this effort to hide his actual whereabouts from his girlfriend. He wanted to prove to her his absence was involuntary and forced. His attempt of covering up his trip was called pathetic. Number 8. Joanna Grimes, a longtime bulimia sufferer, faked her kidnapping and stayed at Heathrow Airport for 36 hours. 10 days before Christmas, Joanna Grimeside's colleagues raised an alarm of her disappearance after the fitness teacher didn't report to work. A rape alarm was found near her car by the police. This led to a massive search for the missing teacher. The search team included dogs and helicopters. 2 days later, she reappeared, claiming to have been kidnapped for 2 days by 2 men. They kept her locked all alone in a house, blindfolded. When the police interviewed her, she couldn't come up with a reasonable explanation as to why she didn't take off her blindfold when she was left alone in the house. After a long interview, Joanna admitted that she disappeared purposefully as she suffered from bulimia nervosa, an eating disorder where a person binges on food and later vomits to prevent weight gain. She didn't want to attend the looming Christmas parties and face the accompanying food, but was also ashamed to open up about her disorder. Number 9. A teenager in Ohio faked her own kidnapping to skip school. A girl in her teens reported to the police her fake kidnapping so she could skip school. She described her kidnapper to the police, who she said attempted to grab her from the bus stop, but she managed to escape. The news created a stir, and panicked parents flocked to the bus stop with guns to protect their kids. They were on the lookout for a man in a black vehicle matching the kidnapper's description. When the police interviewed the girl in the presence of her mother, she admitted to lying and making up the story so she didn't have to go to school. Number 10. Sabrina Belcher, a candidate in the upcoming 2020 elections, running for mayor. The South Carolina candidate tried to run a smear campaign against her opponents by blaming them for kidnapping her. To carry out her plan, she sought help from Christopher James Eady by hiring him to beat her up and break her car windows. The whole debacle was live streamed on Facebook, where a man out of frame is heard threatening to kill her. She is seen to be hit several times before pulled out of the car. Then the video stops abruptly at the broken windows. She then went on to file a complaint with the police. However, the whole drama was uncovered by the police, and both Belcher and Eady confessed to staging the whole thing in a petty attempt to gain sympathy from voters, while blaming her opponents for the attack. So that was 10 people who faked their own kidnapping for basically their own selfish reasons. I do apologize if I did mess up any names or any places that they lived, but anyways, I will catch you guys all in the next video.